Knowledge Products presents The World of Philosophy. Confucius, Lao Tzu, and the Chinese Philosophy. Narrated by Lynn Redgrave. Part 2.
The second central concept in Confucian philosophy is Zhen. Just as Li describes the proper ordering of society, Zhen describes the proper ordering of the self, which for Confucius is the paramount virtue in human life. In Chinese writing, the character for Zhen contains the character for human being, so it may be appropriate to translate Zhen as humaneness. It has also been translated as benevolence, or gentlemanliness, human-heartedness, or love, and in many other ways as well. More generally, the word Zhen refers to whatever is proper for a person of dignity and station. Confucius explains how Zhen is closely tied to Li.
The gentleman has morality as his basic stuff, and by observing the rights, puts it into practice. By being modest, gives it expression, and by being trustworthy in word, brings it to completion. Such is a gentleman indeed.
Even virtues like courage can be dangerous if they are not channeled through the proper rights. The Zhen person, that is, the gentleman, is a person who expresses his virtue in socially authorized ways. Confucius defines humaneness.
To return to the observance of the rights through overcoming the self constitutes humaneness. Do not look unless it is in accordance with the rights. Do not listen unless it is in accordance with the rights. Do not speak unless it is in accordance with the rights. Do not move unless it is in accordance with the rights.
Li, or ritual, is what teaches proper conduct to a humane person, and education is the key to making people humane. Confucius continually emphasizes that a love of learning is absolutely central to a moral life.
To love humaneness without loving learning is liable to lead to foolishness. To love cleverness without loving learning is liable to lead to deviation from the right path. To love trustworthiness in word without loving learning is liable to lead to harmful behavior. To love forthrightness without loving learning is liable to lead to intolerance. To love courage without loving learning is liable to lead to insubordination. To love unbending strength without loving learning is liable to lead to indiscipline.
Learning is conducted first of all through language and the arts, neither of which can exist unless there is a well-established body of social practices. Thus, learning is always a matter of learning about Li through participation in Li. Education also is a way to overcome the self, that is, to expand, to correct, or to improve oneself. Above all, the humane person discovers the correct way to discharge his or her social role. Confucius says humane people will always display what he calls filial piety, so they will show great respect for their parents. A book called The Classic of Filial Piety has traditionally been ascribed to Confucius. Another work written by followers of Confucius entitled Book of Rights describes filial piety in these terms.
A son should not forget his parents in a single lifting of his feet, nor in the utterance of a single word. He will use a boat and not attempt to wade through a stream, not daring, with the body left him by his parents, to go into peril. Not to disgrace his person, and not to cause shame to his parents, may be called filial piety.
Throughout Chinese history, shaming one's family has been the most disgraceful act possible. To ensure that this did not happen, later Confucians gave detailed prescriptions about how husbands are to treat wives, how wives are to treat husbands, how younger brothers are to treat older brothers, how children are to treat parents, and how subjects are to treat rulers. Humaneness, therefore, involves having a certain place in the network of social relations. It means scrupulously observing the proper li of your station. The process of learning one's social role and fulfilling one's humaneness is like the process involved when a great artist carves or polishes jade. Confucius says that the humane person is
like bone, cut, like horn, polished, like jade, carved, like stone, ground.
To become a Zen person is to be made into a work of art. It is to become a sculptor whose work is the self. It is to overcome one's initial roughness and to acquire a beautiful form. Like all arts, carving requires socially recognized forms in order to be comprehended. So in becoming Zen, you give yourself a socially recognized form by observing the rites and the language of your culture. Yet the Zen person has not only a beautiful outward form, but also an inward substance. Like a fine piece of jade, the Zen person's virtue is the basic stuff out of which he is made. The basic substance of the humane person is a goodwill toward all people, and this trait leads a good person to do what is socially right. Confucius boils this process down to a single principle that closely resembles the golden rule which we know in the West as, do unto others as you would have them do unto you. When a disciple asks Confucius whether there is a single word that can guide one's conduct throughout life, the master replies,
It is perhaps the word shu. Do not impose on others what you yourself do not desire.
Confucius was the first person in Chinese history who is known to have been a professional teacher. When he died in 479 BC, his disciples became scattered as China descended into the chaos of a time now known as the Warring States period. But the teachings of Confucius were kept alive by his followers, and then by their followers as well. Confucius had taught that people are refined and fully realized by the practice of li. But he had not clearly addressed the question of what human nature is like before it is sculpted and refined. Are people naturally good, or are they naturally evil? The only clear remark from Confucius on this matter seems to take a neutral position.
Men are close to one another by nature. They diverge as a result of repeated practice.
This statement can be interpreted in many ways. It might mean that people are neither good nor evil by nature, but that they become good or evil because of outside influences. Confucius leaves open the question of what our undeveloped human nature is like. But the question is clearly central to determining the character of the Zen person and in understanding the role of li in human improvement. The two greatest Confucians of the Warring States period were Mengzi and Chuang. A century and a half after Confucius died, these great disciples had a famous debate on the basic nature of human beings. Mengzi claimed that human nature is good, while Chuang declared that it is evil. Mengzi, who lived approximately from 371 BC to 289 BC, was a traveling teacher of Confucianism who occasionally served as an official or an advisor. Other than Confucius, Mengzi is the most important figure in the development of Confucianism, and he believed that people have a natural tendency to love and care for their fellow creatures. He gives this argument in the most famous passage from a book that bears his name, Mengzi. Like the book entitled Analects, the book Mengzi is a collection of short dialogues, probably compiled by his followers.
No man is devoid of a heart sensitive to the suffering of others. Suppose a man were all of a sudden to see a young child on the verge of falling into a well. He would certainly be moved to compassion, not because he wanted to get in the good graces of the parents, nor because he wished to win the praise of his fellow villagers or friends, nor yet because he disliked the cry of the child. From this it can be seen that whoever is devoid of the heart of compassion is not human. Whoever is devoid of the heart of shame is not human. Whoever is devoid of the heart of courtesy and modesty is not human. And whoever is devoid of the heart of right and wrong is not human.
Most people would use the word inhuman to describe a person who could watch with cold indifference as a child tumbled into a well. We normally expect people to be affected by the suffering of others. Mengzi says this response comes from compassion, which is naturally in our hearts. The task of Li is to take our innate virtues and refine them into something that can be properly expressed in a social setting.
The heart of compassion is the seed of benevolence. The heart of shame, of dutifulness. The heart of courtesy and modesty, of observance of the rights. The heart of right and wrong, of wisdom. Man has these 4 seeds, just as he has 4 limbs. For a man possessing these 4 seeds, to deny his own potentialities is for him to cripple himself. When these are fully developed, he can take under his protection the whole realm within the 4 seas. But if he fails to develop them, he will not be able even to serve his parents.
For Mengzi, the first purpose of learning and of statecraft is to return people to their true natures, which are good. The second purpose of learning and statecraft is to teach people how to apply this inborn goodness to particular social situations. Mengzi also argues that humans are basically good because we widely agree on moral matters. For example, we all seem to condemn wanton murder. Mengzi compares this moral sense to our sense of taste.
Men's mouths agree in having the same tastes. Their ears agree in enjoying the same sounds. Their eyes agree in recognizing the same beauty. Shall their minds alone be without that which they similarly approve? What is it then of which they similarly approve? I say it is the principles of reason and righteousness.
Mengzi concludes that all persons are potential sages. They need only to preserve and to develop their true natures. He explains that people do evil because they have been led away from their true natures by bad instruction or poor circumstances. Mengzi draws several dramatic political conclusions from these doctrines. He argues that people can be trusted to have some control over their lives and that political institutions are meant to benefit the people. He even maintains that the people have a right to overthrow despotic rulers. It is difficult to overstate how radical these views were in ancient China, which was politically dominated by a ruling elite. Another central concept in Mengzi's writings is yi, or righteousness. He argues that when a state is ruled without yi, it is a mere dictatorship and should be overthrown. For example, Mengzi argued that an infamous despot, King Zhou, was in fact a robber and a ruffian rather than a true king, and could therefore be justly deposed and even executed.
He who outrages humaneness is called a robber. He who outrages righteousness is called a ruffian. The robber and ruffian we call a mere fellow. I have heard of putting to death of the fellow Zhou, but I have never heard that this was assassinating a ruler.
Mengzi's argument is based on the Confucian doctrine of rectifying names. A tyrant is not a ruler at all. He is a criminal and should be punished as all criminals are. Like Plato in his political classic Republic, Mengzi believes that the ruler should be a sage. the best and wisest of men. Xunzi was the first figure in Chinese history to write systematic philosophical essays. He lived at the very end of the Warring States period in what we know as the 3rd century BC, and he may have been a younger contemporary of Mengzi. By this time, the Zhou dynasty had broken down completely, and for a while there was no emperor at all. Perhaps for that reason, Xunzi was much less optimistic about human nature than Mengzi had been. According to Xunzi,
man's nature is evil. Goodness is the result of conscious activity. The nature of man is such that he is born with a fondness for profit. If he indulges in this fondness, it will lead him into wrangling and strife, and all sense of courtesy and humility will disappear. He is born with feelings of envy and hate, and if he indulges in these, they will lead him to violence and crime, and all sense of loyalty and good faith will disappear.
Whatever people must learn is therefore not part of their nature. It is the result of conscious activity. For example, since we are born selfish and brutal, we must be trained in the proper social forms in order to live together harmoniously. Proper behavior, therefore, is not natural. The 17th century British philosopher Thomas Hobbes also had a pessimistic view of human nature, and he used this as a premise to justify strong government. In a similar manner, Xunzi emphasized the importance of political authority, social rituals, laws, and punishments.
Now, let someone try doing away with the authority of the ruler, ignoring the transforming power of ritual principles, rejecting the order that comes from laws and standards, and dispensing with the restrictive power of punishments. And then watch and see how the people of the world treat each other. He will find that the powerful impose upon the weak and rob them. The many terrorize the few and extort from them. And in no time, the world will be given up to chaos and mutual destruction.
Xunzi maintained that sages are honored because they have managed to overcome their bad nature through conscious activity. Learning and ritual are therefore extremely important. They are our only hope for making people good. Xunzi codified rites of his day in a very elaborate way, and he established the basic structure of Confucian ritual that has been followed ever since. Xunzi differed with Mengzi not only in his view of human nature, but also in his view of nature as a whole. Mengzi had asserted that, like human nature, our whole system of nature is ordered by something like Li, and so nature is good. By contrast, Xunzi was one of the first philosophers in the world to take a mechanistic view of natural events. He believed that nature follows physical laws that have no moral content, so they are morally indifferent. So, according to Xunzi, nature is neither good nor bad.
Nature does not suspend the winter because men dislike cold. Earth does not cease being wide because men dislike great distances. The gentleman does not stop acting because men carp and clamor. Nature has its constant way. You pray for rain, and it rains. Why? For no particular reason, I say. It is just as though you had not prayed for rain, and it rained anyway.
The debate between Mengzi and Xunzi was perhaps the deepest rift in the history of Confucianism. Eventually, Mengzi's position in favor of the goodness of nature became the orthodox Confucian position, and the works of Xunzi were ignored for many centuries. Yet it would come to pass that Xunzi, with his affection and support for strong state powers, would have a dramatic effect on Chinese history. In 221 BC, the first emperor of the Qing dynasty united China by force. The conquest ended China's traditional feudal system and replaced it with a powerful centralized bureaucracy. The emperor seized absolute political and intellectual authority, and he tried to repress all philosophy, especially Confucianism. In fact, the first Qing emperor burned most of the books in China, and it shouldn't come as a surprise that he was advised by one of Xunzi's students, who must have taken to heart Xunzi's enthusiasm for almost absolute state power.
This is the end of Part 2. Please download Part 3 to continue.